Hey, good morning, and thank you for joining us for another B2B Sales and Marketing Fry Talks. This time it's the 37th episode. And today we decided to talk about a very interesting topic. And we have a very exciting guest for this episode today, Steffen Hedebrandt, the co-founder of the Dream Data. And this is a company who is trying to solve all these challenges what we will discuss today about how to understand what exactly B2B companies actually do in terms of their marketing, what works and what doesn't work. And Dream Data just recently did a very interesting study, and they gathered a lot of insights about exactly what type of activities drives the revenue and how this journey looks like. And that is exactly what we are going to cover during today's conversation. So welcome, Steffen.
Thank you so much, guys. I'm really glad you invited me to join your show.
Yeah, good to have you. I looked a bit at your studies and it seemed to me incredibly interesting. So I'm looking forward to ask you also quite a bit of questions.
Happy to answer them.
Yeah, that's very true. And as I mentioned, so I think this is really never-ending story about really understanding how exactly marketing contributes to the sales, what pipeline, what grows the pipeline, and which strategies we need to follow, what we need to drop, and stuff like that. And it seems that you kind of trying to find an answer, or at least you are on the path for that. And maybe before we jump into this specific, study what you did. Could you a bit explain what exactly the Dreams Data does and how you guys help marketeers?
Yeah, thank you, Andres. So Dream Data, you can say, is kind of a B2B go-to-market data platform, which means essentially we want to take anything that touches your account journeys anywhere and extract it out of the data silo that it lives within today. Typically, that's CRM systems, marketing automation systems, customer success tools, the website, the ad platforms, and those kinds of things. And then we extract it out and put it into a new data warehouse where we can actually clean the data up and then structure nicely looking account-based timelines of everything that takes place with each account. So what we can do for our customers is that we can take anything that leaves behind the digital touch and then at least map that into a journey of the accounts. And the reason why I'm stressing this point that it is digital touches means that it's not for all companies, because some companies do business differently. They, invite clients to go golfing or have a steak or stuff like that. And it's a bit harder to describe the value of these. So the main users of our product is B2B companies that are highly digital. So they have a CRM system, they have a website, they run ads online, yes. Salespeople use sales software, etc. But when you do that, then we can actually try to explain you, at least based on the digital touches, what is actually going on here when you win deals and when you lose deals.
Can I ask you about your coverage? What are you able to analyze? Is it data on website only, or you can also see how people are interacting with your, let's say, things on social networks or perhaps even with advertising?
Yeah, a good question, Roland. So we're a first-party data processor. And what that means is that the companies need to collect this data first themselves, and then we can analyze it for them. So it's things that takes place on entities that they are in charge of, meaning we cannot take views on ads on LinkedIn, which is not exposed anywhere, or chats on Facebook, or chats in a Slack group or stuff like that. So it's what takes place on your website, what are the actual activities of the salespeople, who do they call, who do they have meetings with. Can be things like, we met these 25 people at a conference, let's go register that we actually met them at this conference, and stuff like that. So things that leaves behind a digital trace that you have access to. I think this is an even more specific description.
Okay, excellent. Sounds very exciting. But let's maybe switch to the report what you have created some time ago, and I think it's really insightful. Could you maybe just help us understand a little bit the context of this report? So basically, what it consists of, what was behind that?
Yeah, super happy to. So what we basically took was to say, now we have, in this report specifically, I think we're analyzing around 400 different customers' data. And it's basically data about all the customer journeys that our customers have. So we're looking at what are the average benchmarks that we can pull out of this. And just to be specific, then our customers, they're, as I said before, they're B2B companies, typically highly digital. So when you listen to the numbers, that should be kind of as like a part of their conclusion or analysis. But what we could see for us is that an average customer journey in a B2B company would be from the first touch until the deal was won, 192 days. So more than half a year, which is, it's very long, and it's almost depressing to think about that the ads that we set up today, we're gonna have to sit and wait for 6 months before we can see the return. We also found out that I think the average deal had 31 sessions with the clients before it was won. So it says something about in B2B, it's like you don't win anything with one click on one ad. You need to have multiple follow-ups, a lot of remarketing, newsletters, meetings to kind of keep progressing these deals, because they are going to take a long time to make happen. Arnold, you put up the finger.
So my question is, but this number includes not only things like a person visiting website or making repeated visits, but it, as you mentioned, it also includes things like calls with sales reps, perhaps demos, etc. Is that correct?
Yes. Right. So we call it revenue attribution, meaning that we want to take anything that touches these accounts from the first time we see them until they buy. Because if you're only looking at, let's say, at the marketing components, then you're not really valuing what gets this contract signed normally. I can just so a few more of these benchmarks. I guess you guys can share the study afterwards, but there was always more than 2 people involved in the deals. There's a big difference in which channel they arrived at to your website in terms of how long does it take to convert it to a deal afterwards. I think I can try to explain some of the nuances there. So paid, for example, was typically quite much faster than somebody who comes organically from some kind of social media, or somebody who comes from a review platform was actually one of the fastest converting paths that you can take.
Yeah.
And I think it makes sense that if you're already reading reviews about a certain product and then goes to this product's website, then the intention you bring is quite high. Whereas if you just follow a company on social media and once in a while check their website to see how far they are now, there's not a lot of buying intention in that behavior. But it's just really interesting to see these numbers actually reflecting what you can maybe talk your way to as well.
Yes, I think what you mentioned a bit changes my perspective on organic traffic, because usually if we look at organic users, they spend more time on site, they seem to have stronger intent rather than those who come from other channels. And it turns out that probably your data suggests that those who are searching still likely are rather early in their buyer's journey. That, I imagine, may explain the longer time for those organic users until they convert.
Yeah. I think that this number is just so interesting when you deal with B2B companies every day as well. So just in terms of setting expectations of how long does things actually take when we do business, or when you guys carry out a marketing project for people, that doesn't necessarily yield new sales pipeline tomorrow. It's going to take some time. And then it's also going to take the salespeople time before they can close the deals. So when we do budgets, for example, in the 4th quarter next year, if we want to hit a certain number there, then these deals needs to have arrived in the sales pipeline, maybe in Q3. But even in Q2, we already need to start generating the marketing demand, because it's going to take that 6-month cycle before it arrives. And this also contains, if you don't know that it's this long, also contains the risk that you shut down stuff that you shouldn't have shut down, because you're still to see the flowers blossom from the path you kind of set out on.
Yes, I think it's a very important point you are touching upon, because for many companies who are, let's say, doing their first campaigns, they are very eager to see results, and your data suggests that just unless you wait enough, and unless you give it enough time, enough intensity, unless you indeed have those many touches with your customers, you cannot expect results too quickly, right?
Yes, exactly. And I think then I've been through kind of these questions sometimes now. So the next question is then I cannot sit and wait for 6 months. I need to do something. I need to know earlier. And this is where you and your organization need to come up with what you can call proxies, or like what are some things that are normally on the path to us winning the deals that happens earlier than when the contract is signed. So that could be, for many B2Bs, that's a demo call. So maybe you want to understand how long does the average demo call take to get booked. Maybe that's only 2 months, something like that. So you can run the project for 2 months, and if no demo call has come through for the 2 months period, then it's probably not gonna explode in the last 4 months of the period. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does, because I think in B2B, despite you have rather long cycles, you still have some early indicators. And actually, demo, in our experience, is if your customers are signing up for demo, that is all. They are already committing quite a lot. So leads who sign up for demo, and if they happen at all, that's already is a very, very good sign. Look, I wanted to ask you another thing, which I find quite interesting finding in your report, and that was the difference in the length of buyer's journey in Europe and in the United States, and it seems that in the United States it's substantially shorter. Why do you think that could be the case?
So good question, Olens. I think first of all, we still need to just remember it's only like a sample of 400 companies, so I don't want any scientific claims that it's not 100% correct. But I think it's we feel that ourselves as well, that Americans are a little bit quicker at making decisions once in a while, whereas like. And then what is the reasons why they're faster than, I think, at least in Northern Europe, where it's very much like also consensus driven, or like we decide things as a team. And if we do so, it takes a little bit more time to convince all the stakeholders around the table that this is a good solution for us or not. Whereas in the US, it's a little bit more, let's act faster. Of course, these data would always differ from customer to customer as well. So I would say, the thing you should think about is, in your company, is there any regions or countries that are behaving differently? Like, is there a market that is more attractive than others? This is what we want to find out. So instead of spending our marketing money where it's slow and maybe not yielding a lot of return, maybe there's a market like the American market where they make decisions faster and maybe they're more willing to pay. So it comes down to how does your specific company and market act. But in general, I think that would be my guess, Roland, to your question.
I also assume that probably in the America, the competition is higher, and companies just used to this much faster and much more agile type of decision making. That might be another assumption. But again, it's not a scientific, it's just based on my gut feeling. But Steffen, what I also wanted to ask, you mentioned that there are really a lot of these touch points what in average customers are going through, right? Have you also identified, or just maybe not in this report, but from working with your clients, have you identified what are these, like, let's say, most common touch points which then yield into this result what many are looking for, like for instance a demo or maybe some pilot or something like that? Is there a formula which we can leverage?
I can at least I can anecdote some of the things that I recall from across our clients. There's some I typically think about sort of our go-to markets as kind of a bell curve or like a normal distribution. So kind of you want to find the things that are significantly good or significantly bad, and those are the things we should act upon. Very high level in the bad category, there is at least from what I can see in the numbers, is Google display ads, for example, very rarely yield any positive return unless they're set up as retargeting people who have already been on your website. I don't know if this gets a little bit too technical for your audience, then stop me. The same thing with Facebook ads. Typically for these B2B customers, it gets too broad, the setting of how they run ads. So they risk spending a lot of money, reaching a lot of people. But in our little company here, we're not trying to boil the whole ocean. We're just trying to like hit a few specific people with the right message. So there's this kind of broader targeting that where it typically goes wrong, and we can see that it never yields enough return on the activities that they do. Then on the other side, there's tactics that seems to work really well for a lot of companies, which is one of the ones we mentioned. For example, review platforms. If you rank well in your category on the review platform relevant to your industry, then the demand you pull out of that platform is always converting really nicely. In terms of SEO and SEM, meaning like people who search you on Google and then click the ads or click the articles, going for the high intent search behaviors is almost always more important than going to like a broad topic that has a lot of volume but not a lot of intention behind it. Meaning that if you write a really long search query, there's a very specific intent in whether you click the ad or the organic page there. And then, whereas if you write something really broad, then they're actually not in the market trying to buy something right now. So there's a lot of different nuances that can be pulled out of it. I don't know if that answers the question, Andres. Oh, you're muted.
You hear me?
Now I hear you.
Yeah. I just was saying that it's just reconfirm that what we observing as well. That this might be a small exception that, for instance, you may working, but it requires a lot of kind of attention and a lot of kind of targeting techniques to be, bringing the right customers.
I think
Yes,
go ahead, Roland.
Yes, Steffen, can you talk a bit of who are your typical customers, or who get the most benefit out of such analytics? Because I would imagine that these probably are companies who are rather mature and rather sizable, because although this data is very valuable, just to make sense out of them, take action, it probably requires already quite significant marketing department.
Yeah, so it's kind of yes and no. I think if you talk B2B in general, everybody struggles because the free tool that most people use is Google Analytics. And Google Analytics is really not built for a B2B because they're looking at individual devices. And or Roland comes from his computer one day and the phone the next time, they have no clue about that this is the same person. Or if you add that it takes 6 months from when you arrived organically to a page, and then the CRM system says now you bought later. So any B2B that does go to market digitally is struggling today. So the problem exists for all. You can say our ideal customer profile, as you would typically call it, is a company from the lower range would be 50 employees up to several thousand employees. And then the type of company, well, it's highly digital, and we have defined that as B2B software companies. And the reason for that is that when they do their ads, their marketing is typically digital. The salespeople, they use inside sales tools like a CRM, calling software, mailing software, etc. But they also deliver their product digital. So you kind of have the full circle of, they have not heard about us before, they become aware, they go into sales, and then they log into the product. So in these cases, you kind of have the whole timeline of everything that takes place. Now, we've just actually recently launched a free product, which we try to position now as a Google Analytics for B2B companies, which I would love the listeners to try out. But it's essentially a web tracking product that is free to use, but the numbers that are reported in their circles around companies and not individual devices, and then that's reflected in some of the analysis as well. And we hope we can make that a big product at some point.
Yeah. And Steffen, maybe I wanted to ask you once again about those stakeholders. You mentioned that also in your study, you found that there are like different also kind of benchmarks by industries and by size of the company in terms of how many people involved into the process. And can you maybe elaborate a little bit more on this?
Yes, I'm really happy to. So I can say for ourselves at Dream Data, when we sell, the average deal has 5 stakeholders. And that's identified stakeholders. There's probably even more if you think about what takes place out in the organization. Like the CFO, probably I don't care about logging in. I just need to see the contract and the amounts. So I think whenever you sell something relatively complex and of a certain deal size, you're going to be facing a lot of stakeholders. And that also means that the way you sell should be an approach where you recognize that this is real. Don't try to like hide that you have one contact and he says he's gonna buy, because when he stops the call, he has to go convince 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 people in the organization afterwards. So I think in your marketing and in your sales process in general, you have to recognize that you need to multi-thread the approach. So for us, for example, it could be there's the girl who does spend the money on marketing. Maybe there's also a content person. Maybe there's a leader of the marketing team. Maybe there's an ops or data person. Maybe there's a, let's say, data protection officer. Maybe there's a CFO. And what I'm trying to get at here is one, that the salespeople should try to like keep involving more of these people, but your marketing and your content should also be ready to answer the questions that these people might have, even without you being asked the question. So if we have a data protection officer who always has to give his thumbs up as well, make sure that your website contains a lot of information that he needs to see, or is there any industry standard certificates that you can take and then put on your website so they know that they can trust you. Then I think sometimes you get the question, but most of the time it's kind of tip of the iceberg. So they just want to be able to see it on your website without having to talk with you. And I think this goes to all the stakeholders. Think about what is the questions that this person will have. Have we answered them? What will the manager say? Have we answered these questions? What is the business case? Have we answered these questions?
And have you found any let's say different size of the company, or there is no much difference based on that?
In terms of stakeholders?
Yes, in terms of stakeholders. I imagine that the bigger company, probably the more stakeholders you need to work with. The smaller company, they have probably just few people who are taking care of the decision-making process. How that reflected in your study, maybe?
Yeah, I can't remember the numbers, Andres, if they're in there. I'm sorry, but I would imagine definitely as the bigger it gets, there's more people you need, more bureaucracy you need to go through, and maybe particularly now if the money is a bit more tight than what they used to be, then more people has to say, okay, let's spend our money in this way.
I see. Yeah. What is also interesting would be to learn, like, if you see like any correlation between the industry where the company working in terms of your clients, right, or those who participated in the survey, and for instance, the length of the process, or number of the stakeholders, what they engage with or need to engage with. Are there basically any differences between those industries, and if you found any?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of. I think again the numbers the numbers are not super big, so I'm a little bit hesitant to kind of say this is just the truth. But there is a lot of different kind of industries makes decision faster or slower than others, and I think you probably, though, for those who are listening, they probably also know that from their own companies that certain types of customers are slower at selling to. Maybe there will even be they will be less or more likely to churn depending on who they are and so forth. So I think it's about, at least inside of our product, we do bucket all the deals by the industries and the countries they're from, etc. So you can analyze this in your own company. I can't remember the particular numbers, Andres, in the report, but there's definitely differences in both countries and industries.
Yes, I wanted to ask you, what do you think? What is the future of, in general, of website visitor or customer analytics, knowing the increased focus on privacy, regulations, etc.? And some people are even going as far as saying that because of court decisions in some countries, Google Analytics now in effect is illegal in European Union. What's your take on that?
So I think in general, there's like, as a macro trend, there's a rise of, you can say, first-party data collection, meaning that we, in a simpler way, we need to own our own data. Whereas like the last 5, 10, 20 years, it's been okay that these really big companies has been owning our data, and then we would just query the data when we needed it. And that's our own. And as far as I understand, with Google Analytics, the problem is that they cannot, like data tracked in Europe, they cannot guarantee if any of their American employees can access it from the US without asking for consent, etc. So they cannot guarantee where the data ends up at some point, which is why, is it 5 or 6 EU countries that have now deemed Google Analytics illegal? I don't know if there's actually been, like in legal terms, I don't know if there's been any rulings, or it's just been a kind of a comment that it's probably illegal. Anyway, so what does it mean with this first-party data collection? It means that you need to be able to track your own visitors independently, and then you need to be able to guarantee that you store the data in the European Union, and you need to guarantee that it doesn't leave the European Union as well. So we'll see more and more companies who become aware that we actually need to be on top of our own data, and we cannot let we might track something to the big providers, but we also need to, ask questions to them. Are you actually able to safely handle our data? Can we guarantee that these GDPR rules are not inflicted, and all these things? Does that make sense, Roland?
Yes. I also wanted to ask you, is the way you are measuring prospect lead engagement on website, is it cookie based? Does it depend on user actually accepting that the cookie is placed on their machines, or you use some other technology?
Yeah, as a principle, we don't want to do anything illegal. So we only track stuff that the users gives consent to. For Dream Data particularly, it sits when you accept statistical tracking. We use both a cookie, but we also track in the local storage of the browsers. But this can get very technical pretty fast. But we stay within what's legal and don't do kind of like, we don't start tracking before the user gives consent, because that wouldn't be compliant with GDPR. So that also says, no, we're not tracking everything. And what does that mean, that we're not tracking everything? It means that we don't have perfect data, but it's not what you need when you do analytics, at least not in my opinion. We're trying, again, if you think about the bell curve, to find significantly good or significantly bad. So even though, let's say, just thought about the example, like let's say 60% says yes, then hopefully within the 60%, you'll still see stuff that is significantly good or significantly bad. So I don't think you should trust anybody that will ever tell you that you'll get to knowing 100% of what's going on.
Yes, of course. We also see in our experience that data is not perfect, right? No. But still it's very often sufficient to make really well-justified, well-based decisions.
Yeah, exactly.
Excellent. I think we got quite a few interesting insights you shared from your report. We definitely will be referring to that, so people can go and read it and familiarize themselves and see the data. But what really was interesting is to understand that, or once again to reconfirm that you should not be having like an illusion that you can drive revenues just from very short-term campaigns or short-term activities. There is at least several months of the customer journey before you touch them until they actually sign up with you. That's something to keep in mind and to remember when you plan your next year budget and next year activities, what probably happens for many of our listeners right now. And secondly, what was interesting also you shared is that the number of people involved. We kind of know that, but I think we tend to forget about this complexity, what is behind the decision-making process. And it's very important really to plan your marketing accordingly, that you different stakeholders covered in one or another way. Even as you said, having just a dedicated part on your website which answers the question for this particular person, so that they can quickly find what they're looking for. And then what is also important, you said that there are this absolutely not working or bad things and things what kind of indicates that they are working, and that is where you can at least take a decision on where to go, which direction to continue your investments. And these channels, what you said, not always so obvious. So you might think of this SEO-driven leads with kind of high intent, but in reality, we might also see that it's not happening. So that these people who are coming from this channel not necessarily actually convert, and vice versa from the paid media, you can get maybe even much better and high intent leads. So again, I think the call to action here would be go on the data and try to find those extremes, and then build your kind of assumptions and build your experiments around this to just verify, and then based on that you can really continue your activities. So thanks a lot, Steffen, for this conversation. I found it very insightful and very valuable. I wish you and your company to really achieve this mission, what you have set for yourself, empowering B2B marketeers which will help them finally to justify everything what they do. and be better in what they do. I hope that we will have another opportunity to have another conversation, in a while, to see and to hear maybe some new insights from everything you do.
Thank you, Andres, and thank you so much for having me, guys.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.